one of the more fascinating things about losing my main Twitter account and having to use my backup while I wait for the issue to be resolved, if fucking ever, is that I keep running into people who had my old account blocked but don't have my current account blocked. And this leads to some interesting moments as they realise who I am, I guess, or me being able to see tweets that I find interesting and that I will talk about or talk to or comment on and so on. Laurie Penny, for example, or GMS magazine. I don't know why we would have had any falling out, other than he may have lost his mind during Gamergate like so many people did. But he posted an interesting couple of topics. Well, an interesting topic, and then I looked at his feed and saw a couple of other interesting topics that I'd like to talk about today, rather than what I was going to do, which was to do an And Science video about veganism. Okay, so what was he talking about? He was talking about edginess.
Making a story with just white het men does not make you edgy. Creating a world with blatant misogyny is not edgy. It is cheap shit. Want to be edgy? Then try a blatantly diverse world that opposes our society and face the bigots. I dare you.
To which I replied, and he favourited, that that's not edgy either. That's run-of-the-mill these days. Edge lies where transgression does, testing and violating the norms of the time. Diverse would have been edgy, maybe in the 80s or prior, before Captain Planet or United Colours of Benetton, but now it's pablum. Everything tries to be exactly what he's talking about. I'm not sure what would qualify as genuinely edgy anymore without being regressive, but it's worth some pondering, and I retweeted to my followers asking for any ideas. Didn't get any yet.
That is the thing, adding minorities as heroes, LGBTQI+ characters as stars, showcasing a diversity we lack. That is going against a lot of the norms of our time, depending where you live, of course. You're not wrong, though. I just think there are too many regressive morons out there who publish work that is regressive because they think it's edgy when it is not. Unless they come out of their comfort zone, they're not edgy, just cheap shit.
And you better listen good.
Oh, God! It is you! Why am I bothering talking to you?
Because it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane.
So it went from, oh, you have a good point, you're not wrong, that's a good idea, I'm going to favourite that tweet, to, oh my god, within the space of about 5 seconds. Followed by, of course, a block, because you can't have people with different points of view communicating with you. What's the point of a worldwide global communication system if we can't just randomly ignore people? And he signed off with this.
Holy shit. Just had one of the kings of bigotry try to start a conversation with me. I'm sorry if you saw that, friends. I've blocked that wanker, and hopefully will never happen again.
Kings of bigotry. There isn't a bigoted bone in my body, which is why I end up in conflict with people like you all the time, Parko, because you are bigots. You just view your bigotry as being acceptable. Don't be a tosser all your life. But enough Twitter drama and enough picking on Parko. He does good work, he's a bit of a tosser when it comes to this kind of thing, and you can't entirely blame him. Right, the topic itself is actually interesting. What is edge? What is edgy? And I am apparently considered by some to be a bit of an edgy boy. I don't see myself that way. I am interested in things that are transgressive and difficult, and I can't help but be a contrarian. When you tell me I can't do something, I want to do it twice as hard and twice as deep. So, to me, like I spelled out in that tweet, I think what makes something edgy is when it challenges and questions the orthodoxy of the day. So when you go back to the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the orthodoxy of the day was one that was questioned by the whole Rainbow Nation stuff, the incorporation of homosexuality and so on. But that's not been edgy in, getting on for 30 years. That has been the run of the mill. I mean, it had it in the 90s when it started to become ubiquitous, and now today it is ubiquitous. Every show feels like, it seems, it has to tick a whole bunch of diversity boxes, and it places that as a priority ahead of plot and story and so on. But if you oppose the consequence of this patronising tokenist policy, you will instantly get misrepresented as a racist or a sexist or whatever. I'm all for diversity, but not at the expense of quality of story and so on. And unfortunately, when people focus upon diversity and so forth, they tend to let the other things fall by the wayside. Not always. The other problem that we see is that in trying to diversify media, there's precious little in the way of creation of new media that goes on, and there's an awful lot of usurpation and changing of things that have gone before. And you're naturally going to encounter resistance if you turn the Hulk into a gay trans Polynesian in a wheelchair. It's not going to work for people. It's not that they hate gay people or trans people or Polynesians or people with disabilities, it's that you fucked with something that they love. But I'm getting off track. The point is that edginess, transgression, comes from challenging orthodoxy, and what is the orthodoxy of today? The orthodoxy of today is this box-ticking diversity. It is even changing and altering history in order to create diversity, creating false impressions of what our history actually was. And if you're actually interested in social justice rather than being a social justice warrior, this disillusion of history, this overwriting of history, should concern you, because the saying is accurate. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And if we memory hole our past, if we memory hole the Confederate States or the great grand figures of British Empire, if we memory hole them, we don't remember the bad. Sure, they were first commemorated for being good, but now they're reminders of what was bad about our past, and that's why people want to tear them down, but that is a huge mistake. Again, I'm getting off topic. So the orthodoxy of today is this hyper-politically correct, box-ticking tokenism. It's patronising, it's racist, it's sexist, but that doesn't seem to matter to a lot of people. They still want to impose this vision. So it is transgressive to go against that. It is transgressive and edgy to present a gender binary, to have sexualized imagery, to explore sexuality. We live in an age of new prudery where you can't really do that unless you attach some qualifier to it, like queer or trans or whatever else. Yeah, heterosexuality is taboo in its expression, whether it be male interest, female display behaviour, whatever else. So that is transgressive, and it's not regressive to explore that necessarily. I mean, it's not regressive to explore that even if you're presenting a regressive viewpoint. It doesn't mean you agree with it or think it's anything other than fantasy. It's just, it's interesting and it holds our engagement because it transgresses what we're being told and what we're seeing every day. And pushing and questioning those boundaries through art and via other means is how we determine what's true, how we establish and back up the values of the day. So transgression serves a purpose, not only to stretch and expound boundaries as it has in the past, but to question the new, not just the old. The problem we have then is, how do we transgress? How do we explore these edge cases without being regressive, when so much of what is transgressive today can be seen as regressive, such as exploring the value of the family, or heterosexuality, or ideas, outmoded ideas about race and so on. We can examine them, I think, without being regressive by exploring them in a fantasy space via analogy. There's a big problem with that, though, in that a lot of the fuss in comics, say for Comicsgate, centers around the fact that comics have always been political, but outside of propaganda comics, the early ages of comics, that exploration used to be via analogy. The classic example being the X-Men. They were presenting a comment and an analogy for race relations in the US during the Civil Rights era, but through the lens of mutants. So it wasn't tackling it head on per se, but it was tackling the same issues via analogy. And the social justice warriors, for want of a better term, the regressive left, I guess, don't seem to understand analogy, both when they produce content and when they criticize content. So they will produce stuff that is smack bang on the nose, doesn't have any analogy to it, doesn't try to teach you a lesson through analogy. And when they examine something that is exploring issues through analogy, they will also take that at face value and criticize and condemn and even hate it on that basis. So we need to thread the needle to... edgy isn't what I aim for. I aim for exploration of transgressive issues. In my game, The Little Grey Book, for example, it's an exploration of the social media panopticon in which we find ourselves, where anything and everything that we say and do is instantly judged by strangers, and that there is no winning move to play. I mean, it's subtitled An Exercise in Futility for that reason. There is just no way to behave that will satisfy everyone who is watching you and looking for reasons to condemn you, as Parko demonstrates. I do that through an analogy, through a dystopian future, taking what exists in this world and exaggerating it out of all proportion and putting a particular spin on it. There's a game called Mythorog by an infamous racist black metal guy, Varg Vikernes, and that explicitly explores race from the alt-right perspective. That is a regressive example of edginess. He's not he is pushing the boundaries of what people believe today, but he's doing it in exactly the same on-the-nose way that other people do things. And as a result, it doesn't come across very well. But there's no reason we couldn't explore these issues in a game in a way that is on that edge and explores that tension. You could have a game set in a world where settlers from a semi-European continent, whatever, land in a new world, a new land, and discover that it's populated by intelligent beings that aren't human, and that are in many ways perhaps genetically predisposed to things that we consider evil. You could view them as being like the Cro-Mags in Sliders, for example. And that could be a way of exploring racial tensions, progressive politics. How would it deal with a population that actually is horrendous? It's not saying anything about the real world, but it's an issue that instantly, I'm sure the hairs on your neck are rising, you're kind of rankling slightly at it. That's what makes it interesting. The vampire was always interesting because it was an exploration of being a monster. And yet the pressure and the orthodoxy of today pressing down on Vampire 5th Edition has made them put in all kinds of disclaimers and recommendations for hex cards and veils and things, all of which gets in the way of exploring the very dynamic that drove the original Vampire and made it a more interesting narrative game. What is it to be a monster? What if you have this unnatural urge driving you to do horrible things. You know, vampirism has been used as an analogy for disease, for rape. Dracula is essentially a veiled rape novel, and it contains a lot of xenophobia and worries towards foreigners. H.P. Lovecraft's work is driven in huge part because of his racism, his fear of the other, his xenophobia, made his fiction in no small part as good as it is. Even though we all, I would hope, disagree with his viewpoints, his unease and his exploration of that unease is a big part of what made his writing so compelling. There's edgy for edgy's sake, which is not what I try to do. And there's transgression and exploration of transgression. You know, why do these things make us uncomfortable? How can we examine them? What if there's some truth to this side or that side? What would it be like if that was true? This is all important stuff, not just for artists, but for scientists, for everyone, for all of us as individuals, to explore and understand why we hold the positions that we do, and whether it makes sense to hold these positions that we do. And we can only do that through examination, and the orthodoxy of today doesn't really allow for that examination and exploration, and that's a huge shame. So I don't really have an answer, so I'm going to throw it over to you. How do we explore that edge? How do we transgress the current orthodoxy today without moving backwards? If you've got any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I'm a ninja. Yo, my life is like a video game. My main thing when I'm in the zone. One player, one life in the mark. Remember the dog.
Go ninja, go!
No fucking it down. I'm cutting down anyone I'm apart. Trying to fuck up my game with razor sharp political throw stars. Cheer to my flows on horse.
What happened today? See, I don't like the, I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity. Yeah!